الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة.
The year is 1609. Sultanahmet I ascended the throne at the age of 14, and now he is 20. The Ottoman Empire is at its peak, stretching across North Africa and Arabia, all the way into the Caucasus and the Balkans. For the last 200 years, Ottoman sacred architecture has been developing. It culminated in the appearance of the architect Sinan, who built 300 structures across the Ottoman world until he reached the age of 99. Former pupil and senior assistant Sedefkar Mehmed Ağa is now the royal architect and has been commissioned to build a cathedral mosque of overwhelming size, majesty and splendor. It is to be built on a site of great symbolic significance and the most prominent location in the city. The location of the palace of the Byzantine emperors facing the Hagia Sophia and the Hippodrome. Later it will be known in the West as the Blue Mosque and be recognized as one of the greatest monuments of sacred architecture in the world. Such a mosque complex contains not only a prayer space, but schools, clinics and hospitals, lodging and soup kitchens. The front gate at the entrance of the mosque complex is decorated with muqarnas or stalactites, inviting entrant into an internal space. Above the gate is the Arabic calligraphic panel of the Shahada, or the Muslim testimony of faith. La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah, meaning, there is no God but the one God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Bearing witness to this testimony is the first pillar of the 5 pillars of Islam, that are foundations upon which Islam is built. Bearing witness to this testimony is also the doorway by which one enters the faith of Islam. The meaning of the term Islam is derived from its Arabic root, which means both peace and surrender to the divine will. In its religious context, it means to find the path of peace via submission to God. Furthermore, if we were to invert this truth, it could also be said that it is the way to free oneself from surrendering to anything besides God. According to the Quran, the universe is a work of art, and it indeed has an architect. This architect is signified by the name of Allah or God, and he also possesses the name As-Salam, meaning peace. By submitting to him, a collective and social peace can also be reached. From an historical point of view, Islam has been the common message preached by all of God's messengers from Adam to Muhammad. Consequently, the original essence of these divine messages, far from being unrelated to one another, are in fact the same. However, one may describe its transition via its transmission by the prophets, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, as different versions of this same message. And the final version is that which was given to Muhammad. Generally speaking, those who are unfamiliar with Islam often associate it only with Muhammad without acknowledging his predecessors. In reality, Islam is simply the common name given to the message that God has sent to mankind throughout history. Muslims thus respect all the messengers of God before Muhammad without ascribing divinity to any of them, including Muhammad, Jesus, or Moses. The first phrase, La ilaha illallah, is to believe in the absolute oneness of God, who is given the name in Arabic, Allah, a name also traditionally used by Middle Eastern Christians and Jews. In the revelation of the Quran, Allah describes himself as follows: In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Say, He is Allah, the one and only. Allah, the eternal, absolute. He was not born, and nothing was born from him, and there is none like him. God is the only deity, and there is nothing comparable to him. This truth is mentioned in all previous sacred texts. The Creator possesses many attributes. According to Islam, the universe has an artistic harmony, and God is the architect of the entire universe and everything in it. He is the benevolent, as well as being known by the names of peace and the merciful. Moreover, He is the just and the almighty. He is the first, the last, and the eternal. He created the universe as a manifestation of His divine attributes, for His mercy was so vast and overflowing that He wished to give creatures an opportunity to partake in the great joy of existence, so that they might come to know Him and thereby achieve the bliss of the knowledge of God in His infinite beauty and majesty. The second phrase, Muhammad Rasulullah, is the affirmation that Muhammad is the messenger of God. Muslims believe that Islam is a common guidance given by all of God's messengers from the beginning of humanity. In 610 AD, Muhammad, known among his own people as Al-Amin, or the trustworthy one, had the habit of retreating during the month of Ramadan to a cave on a mountain outside the city of Mecca for spiritual contemplation. It was there at the age of 40 that the angel of revelation, Gabriel, appeared to him, declared his prophetic nature, and began the revelation of the Quran. Over the next 23 years, the angel Gabriel came and brought the revelation from God to his prophet. It became known as the Quran, and it is the body of guidance upon which the Muslim community bases its religious and spiritual practices. Reiterating the revelations that came before as given to Jesus and Moses and other prophets, it became the seal of revelations and was memorized by Muhammad and a number of his companions. Prophets are sent into the world as human reflections of divine will, purpose, beauty, and justice. Indeed, they reflect all the attributes of God and provide human models whereby their followers can fulfill the principles of Islamic spirituality and self-realization. Human beings are the deputies of God on earth, and we are called to perfection. The prophets are the perfect human beings who God has sent so that through our following them we might achieve total inner and outer peace and closeness to God. Now we enter the spacious courtyard of the mosque. The courtyard is about as large as the mosque itself and has turrets on the corner domes. which sets it apart from other mosque courtyards. It is used primarily for overflow during the Friday prayers and the prayers of the feast days. It is surrounded by a continuous vaulted arcade. The ablution is an act of cleansing which brings a Muslim into spiritual purity in preparation for prayer. In the origins of Christianity and Judaism, ritual purity is also mentioned. A narration of the Prophet Muhammad surmises, "If one washes in a river 5 times a day, will one then not be clean? So it is with the believer who purifies himself before the prayer." Yet he told his followers not to waste water, even should they be next to a flowing river. Looking up, we see the minarets crowning the corners of the building. The Blue Mosque has 6 minarets. Traditionally, the one who calls to prayer would climb the narrow spiraled staircase 5 times a day to announce the call to prayer, echoed by other mosques in the vicinity. The meaning of the call to prayer is, "God is great, God is great. I bear witness that there is no God but the one God. I bear witness that Muhammad is God's messenger. Come to prayer, come to salvation. God is great. There is no God but the one God." In the early morning, the words, "Prayer is better than sleep," are added. This call summons the Muslims for obligatory prayers 5 times a day. It is called aloud, declaring and summarizing the Muslim creed. The 5 prayer times are determined by the daily passage of sunlight, the first being when the first light appears in the sky until sunrise, the second after the sun passes the zenith till mid-afternoon, the third from mid-afternoon until sunset, the fourth after sunset until last light, the fifth once the last light leaves the sky until shortly before dawn. As the Muslim day starts at sunset, some consider this is the first prayer. This cycle puts the Muslim in touch with the natural rhythms of creation. Each prayer time contains a symbolism that mirrors the human journey. The dawn prayer signifies birth and renewal. The noon prayer indicates the prime of youth. The late afternoon prayer signifies old age, while the sunset prayer indicates the crossing over from this life to the hereafter. The evening prayer signifies the day of judgment. The call of the muezzin has become a sacred art form, reflected in the melodious chanting of the adhan. In Turkey, the call for prayer is often called in a different musical mode or maqam. The muezzin is chosen for his good character, voice and skill. When calling to prayer, the muezzin faces the Qibla, or the direction of the Kaaba in Mecca. The Prophet Muhammad's simple mud brick mosque did not have a minaret, but when minarets were added to the mosque, the position of muezzin in cities was often given to a blind man who could not see down into the inner courtyards of the surrounding houses and thus violate privacy. Before entering the mosque, we remove our shoes out of respect for the mostly empty sacred space, with the floor covered by carpets. No Islamic artistic product has become better known outside the Islamic world than the pile carpet, more commonly referred to as the Oriental carpet. Their versatility is utilized in everyday Muslim life, from floor coverings to artistic enrichment, from cushions to bolsters and bags of all shapes and sizes, and to religious objects such as prayer rugs, which are placed momentarily on the floor to provide a clean place to pray. Cleanliness and modesty are basic Islamic principles, so visitors are expected to be covered and behave respectfully in places of worship. This rule is even valid for the Sultan or governors of today. A heavy iron chain hangs in the upper part of the courtyard entrance on the western side. Only the Sultan was allowed to enter the courtyard of the mosque on horseback. The chain was hung there so that the Sultan had to lower his head every time he entered the courtyard. This was a symbolic gesture to emphasize that even a ruler must be humble before the divine. The Arabic word used for mosque is masjid, meaning place of prostration. In the Holy Scriptures, there are many examples of prostration as an expression of worship. It is the ultimate expression of submission and humility reserved only for God. Various examples of the concept of prostration can be shown in the Holy Scriptures and in different cultures. It may be observed that Abraham, Balaam, Ezekiel, Joshua, Ezra, Daniel, John, and Jesus did so, likewise falling on their faces before their Lord. In the final version of Islam, Muslims are required to prostrate a certain number of times in daily congregational prayers, in the way that was taught by the Prophet Muhammad. The term final version of Islam may seem strange to those who are not familiar with it. Yet by this term, we are referring to the fact that true religion is one, for it is all from God. And the final version of Islam that the Prophet Muhammad came with was simply a renewed and purified form of that primordial religion. The space is empty because the ritual prayer is performed in rows. Muslims stand shoulder to shoulder as they perform the prayer through a series of movements, standing, bowing with the hands on the knees, and then prostrating. A journey of existence, melting of the ego, and annihilation in front of the Lord. This is an inner journey, step by step. The complete cycle of movements are called rak'ats. During these rak'ats, chapters from the Quran and specific prayers are recited. At the very beginning of the prayer, one's hands are raised to the ears with palms facing forward, knowing Allah is greater than all that we can imagine, and saying, Allahu Akbar, or God is great. This brings one into a sacred state, meaning, I put all matters other than God behind me. The opening chapter of the Quran is then recited, Al-Fatiha. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. Praise be to Allah, most merciful, most compassionate. Master of the Day of Judgment. You alone do we worship, and you alone do we ask for help. Guide us on the straight way, the way of those whom you have bestowed your grace, not those upon whom is your anger, nor those who go astray. The Muslim then bows while glorifying God, then prostrates to affirm total dependence on God and humility before His greatness. The prayer is then completed by turning the head from side to side, each time saying, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, or may peace and Allah's mercy be upon you. This brings one to a state of peace, which is then shared with others. This is the same manner in which Jesus used to greet in Hebrew. So Islam, which literally means being at peace, is practiced and realized over and over again throughout the day. It is a key theme in the life of every Muslim to constantly remember and repeat this act of submission, thereby receiving peace from the divine reality and then extending it towards everything in creation. If you look at the front wall of the mosque, you will see a semicircular niche, that is the mihrab, or prayer niche. In the Blue Mosque, it is made of finely sculptured marble with a stalactite niche. The mihrab or prayer niche in every mosque indicates the direction of prayer towards the Kaaba in the city of Mecca. The Kaaba is the mother of all mosques, to which Muslims go to perform the Hajj pilgrimage. Just like all other mosques, the Blue Mosque was built facing the direction of the Kaaba. It is located in the city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia which is said to be the location of the Earth's golden ratio. Pilgrims join processions of hundreds of thousands of people who simultaneously converge on Mecca for the week of the pilgrimage and perform a series of rituals and then celebrate the 3-day global feast. According to a narration, elements of the pilgrimage can be traced back to the time of Abraham, around 2000 BC. During the pilgrimage, Muslims also commemorate the story of Abraham, Hagar, and Ishmael. The Prophet Abraham built the Kaaba with his son Ishmael as the first place of worship of the one God on earth. As is known, Abraham had sons. There is much knowledge about Isaac's chain of descendants up to Jesus, found in the Old and New Testaments. Ishmael, on the other hand, was raised in Mecca, where he built this house of worship, known as the Kaaba. Over time, pagan beliefs became popular, and the original purpose of the holy place was altered by the polytheistic people of Arabia. During the period before the Prophet Muhammad, the Kaaba contained hundreds of idols, totems of each of the tribes of the Arabian Peninsula, with idols of pagan gods and also some representing Jesus and Mary. And each year tribes from all around the Arabian Peninsula would converge on Mecca as part of a pilgrimage. The original purpose of the Kaaba was lost, and it became a shrine that contained hundreds of idols of every kind. The Prophet Muhammad was commanded by God to re-establish the original purpose and rites of the pilgrimage during his lifetime. And on his return to Mecca, all idols were removed from the Kaaba. In the year 632, a few months after returning to Medina from his well-known farewell pilgrimage, he fell ill and passed away. By the time of his death, most of the Arabian Peninsula had left paganism and had converted to monotheistic Islam, and he had united the tribes of Arabia into a single Muslim community. The central ritual of the pilgrimage is for pilgrims to circumambulate the Kaaba, calling upon their Lord for acceptance and forgiveness. The pattern of circumambulation around the Kaaba is actually a mirroring of the cosmic pattern found in everything in existence, from art to the spiritual dimension of pilgrimage. This is a universal pattern that the great Muslim scholars try to teach. Muslims don't worship the Kaaba, which is called the house of God, and turning towards the Kaaba during prayer does not limit God to that space. God is the creator of time and space. The Quran says, "So wherever you turn, there is the face of God." According to the mystical dimension of Islam, known as Sufism, the heart of a believer can be called the house of God. Therefore, it can also be referred to as a sacred place. One should be very careful not to desecrate it. From this point of view, a person should not break the heart of his fellow human being, and must protect his heart from arrogance, envy, or anything that corrupts it. It is here in the mihrab that the imam, or the prayer leader, stands when he leads the congregation. In order for the imam to be seen at night, the Ottomans used to place 2 large candlesticks, one on each side of the mihrab. Now, even in the days of electric lighting, they are often left for decorative purposes. Looking around the mosque, we notice the absence of figurative statues or decoration. Typically, though not entirely, Islamic art and decoration have focused on geometric and arabesque patterns and calligraphy, rather than on human figures. This reflects God's signature in the creation around us, rather than reflecting human individuality. It is another way we acknowledge that the universe is God's artwork or creation, and God is a supreme creator and architect. There are 5 essential forms of Islamic art that once known can be universally recognized throughout the Muslim world. Calligraphy, tessellation, linear repeat patterns, complex star polygons, arabesque, or vegetal design. Also attracting our vision around the mosque are exquisite Iznik tiles. More than 20,000 tiles were produced in Iznik during its most glorious period of the 16th and 17th centuries. They have never been equalled since. The master potters such as Kasab Hece, Barish Effendi created an effusion of arabesques with more than 50 tulip designs alone. As the gaze ascends, the upper levels are dominated by the colour blue that gives the mosque its name. The work of transforming the basic materials of stone, clay and glass into a magnificent building is an analogy of the transformation that the Islamic way of life effects on a person who truly lives it. Islam is a way of transformation given to mankind to bring the human created from earth of this world to the level of being of which God Almighty said through a narration of His Prophet, "Neither my heavens nor my earth can contain me, but the heart of the believer can contain me." Islam is the way to awaken man to his true reality and manifest it inwardly and outwardly throughout the creation. As our gaze descends towards the right, we see the pulpit or richly decorated mimbar, where the Imam stands when he is delivering his sermon during the congregational prayer on Fridays or other holidays. In the larger mosques, the mimbar is usually to the right of the mihrab and is shaped like a small tower with a pointed roof and stairs. Because the prayer is in close physical proximity, men and women pray in separate lines or areas to avoid distraction. This varies from mosque to mosque. Opposite the mimbar to the left of the mihrab is a raised platform where the assistants of the Imam and the ones who have memorized the Quran sit. The Quran is always memorized in its entirety by a segment of the community. Memorization requires no expensive raw materials and is a secure way of preserving the message. A manuscript could easily be destroyed, but if the Quran is memorized, it will never be lost. The beautifully intoned recitation of Quran is accessible even to those who do not understand Arabic, for it unveils the beauty of the sound of revelation to the human heart. The recitation of Quran has become a unique art in itself. Many competitions are held for the most beautiful recitation throughout the Muslim world.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yasin والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون
On the walls of the Blue Mosque, one will notice a lot of calligraphy. They are extracts of verses from the Holy Book, the Quran. The term Holy Book is usually used in reference to the Old Testament, the Torah and the Psalms of David, as well as the New Testament, the Gospel. However, Muslims also use this term to refer to the Quran as the final testament. Interestingly, the final holy book, the Quran, has been protected from all kinds of editing and is preserved in its originality. Its translations into other languages are not accepted as being equivalent to its original Arabic form, but are rather referred to as translations of the meaning rather than direct translations. The beautiful harmonic sound of Quranic recitation has attracted a tremendous amount of attention throughout the ages. Additionally, today, the Quran bewilders researchers of modern science and mathematics. For instance, many synonyms and antonyms of words such as angels and Satan, faith and infidelity, paradise and hell, are each used the same number of times throughout the Quran. Another example is that the word day is repeated 365 times in singular form, while its plural and dual forms, days together, are repeated 30 times. The number of repetitions of the word month is 12. The student of the scriptures will find enough evidence that the mathematical design was used for the previous scriptures as well. The mathematical codes with prime numbers such as 7 or 11 are as if to proclaim the first commandment in all the scriptures, that there is only one God. Or the code with 19 is as if to proclaim God's attributes as the Alpha and the Omega. Yet for Muslims, the main miracle of the Quran is that its guidance and wisdom can help its followers experience a transformation. Also, in the southeast corner of the mosque, we find the royal kiosk. It comprises of a platform, a loggia, and 2 small retiring rooms. The royal kiosk is supported by 10 marble columns. It has its own prayer niche, decorated with a jade rose and 100 Qur'ans on gilded lecterns. It is related that the Sultan would spend the last 10 days of the month of Ramadan in the royal kiosk, in spiritual retreat. This was done in accordance with the habit of the Prophet Muhammad, who would do the same, a tradition still practiced by many Muslims today, striving for spiritual advancement. Fasting during the month of Ramadan is another pillar of Islam. In the Quran, God says that fasting has been ordained upon you as it was upon those before you. According to the earliest prophetic narrations, this refers to the Jewish practice of fasting on Yom Kippur. The month begins at the birth of the new moon and continues till the next new moon, either 29 or 30 days. As the Islamic calendar is a lunar calendar based on the phases of the moon, it starts 10 or 11 days earlier each year. So throughout a cycle of 33 years, a Muslim will fast in all the seasons of the year. The Muslim fasts each day from the moment when the first light enters the sky, about 1.5 hours before sunrise, until sunset. With the physical fast, one abstains from food, drink, sexual relationships, and smoking. The spiritual side of the fast is to control one's appetites and passions and increase one's patience, humility, and gratitude. It is to redirect the heart away from worldly activities, cleansing the inner soul and freeing it from harm. It also teaches self-discipline, sacrifice, and empathy for those who are in less fortunate circumstances, thus encouraging acts of generosity and charity. Muslims fast to try to obtain God's acceptance and increase their night prayers during this month to try to get closer to Him. At the end of the month, a fixed amount, or zakat, is required to be given to those in the community who do not have enough to celebrate. It is then concluded with a prayer in the mosque on the morning of the new month. There is then a big feast and celebrations. The other feast the Muslims celebrate is at the completion of the pilgrimage. To purify oneself and one's affairs is an everyday obligation for every Muslim. Through prayer, the believers cleanse their souls, turning to the Lord 5 times a day. And through another pillar, zakat, Muslims pay out an obligatory tax of 2.5% on excess income to cleanse their wealth. Therefore, if they do not give it to the poor, their wealth will be considered unclean. Zakat is considered the right of the poor and the needy. Therefore, paying it purifies the remainder of the wealth and also alleviates need from its recipients. These acts of worship, salah and zakat, prayer and charity, are constantly paired together in the Quran. Besides zakat, there is the other form of voluntary charity, or sadaqah, that encompasses any act of giving out of compassion, love, friendship, or generosity. We are asked to give sadaqah from the best things that we have and love. This will strengthen relationships in the community and help unify it. Even if an individual has no wealth, he can perform sadaqah by other means through good and generous action, so both poor and rich can contribute in this endeavor. The Prophet said, even smiling at your fellow human being is a sadaqah. The mosque was traditionally designed with gardens surrounding it, reflecting the setting of the natural world and the eventual destination of the gardens of paradise. We have been placed on this earth as khalifs or deputies to be custodians of the natural world around us. Even in times of warfare, Muslims are forbidden to destroy trees, plants and fields, and random violence or destruction is never sanctioned. Our duties are for the righteous preservation of this world, but our destination is the next world. The Prophet Muhammad said, even if it is Judgment Day, you should still plant the seeds in your hand. At the garden of the mosque, one can see the place for funerals and burials. In the Quran it says, we belong to God and to Him we shall return. In our life, in the womb, a life chosen for us by our Creator, our physical organs are developed to serve us in this world. Likewise, in this world, our body serves as a framework through which we can develop our spiritual abilities, so that we are able in the end to experience bliss in the hereafter. It can be argued that even a man who has read no books can still sense that there is an architect who has designed this harmonious and artistic universe. He is able to sense this through the natural goodness and insight that God has placed within him, the fitrah. Likewise, he can also think of life in another world. He can grasp with his intellect that this life will end, just like the life in the womb ends with birth. Similarly, the life after death is like the life after physical birth. Just as the umbilical cord is cut off after birth, we as spiritual beings continue our life once we are cut off from our physical bodies. In the womb, we developed physical organs for functions such as breathing and digesting. Likewise, in this world, we are expected to develop our spiritual abilities in order to reach bliss in the hereafter. We can draw a metaphor of the transformation of the carbon element into either coal or diamonds. We are given the base material of our lives, and through spiritual work, we can progress and transform into diamonds, or purified souls. Then we are ready to be joined with those whom we love in the next world, in the company of the purified souls. God says in the Quran, O soul at peace, return to your Lord, well pleased and pleasing. Enter among my servants, enter my garden.
الله أكبر الله